welcome back to the What the Falk Sunderland preview show as we look ahead to this weekend's game with Burnley. It's been a stunning start of the season for Sunderland as we added a 4-0 thrashing of Sheffield Wednesday to a very impressive opening day win against Cardiff City, and the only side to start better than ourselves is that of recently relegated Burnley, who we face on Saturday. Things have changed a bit since we last chatted, so we've roped in the excellent returning guest Joe from the TurfCast. Joe, it's been a little while, mate. How are you doing? Are you all right?
Yeah, a couple of years. We had a sabbatical, I think we'll call it, up in the Premier League. But yeah, obviously enjoyed the last time we were in the Championship. Enjoyed my trip up to the Stadium of Light last time. Fingers crossed for a less dramatic game this time, but hopefully come out on the right side of the 3 points for us, as I'm sure you'll obviously disagree on that one.
Of course. We will dig into last season a bit, I'm sorry, but let's start from the top of the good stuff. A little bit, just for confidence for us. We won 4-0 on Sunday. You won 5-0 on Saturday against Cardiff. That's 9 goals in 2 games. I watched the game against Luton. Extremely impressive. You're top of the league. I feel like I'm asking an obvious question, but what have you made of the opening 2 weeks for Burnley?
Yeah, it's been a good start. And to be fair, we haven't... I think in the Luton game, I know you've already mentioned it, but we did play very, very well against them. But against Cardiff, we weren't great. I don't know if you've seen the highlights, but we were gifted a goal with the own goal for the first one. And on that point, there was nobody that was really taking control of the game. So I wouldn't say it came against a run of play, but it was just so bizarre. And then after that, Cardiff got on top and they were the better side. And then when we went 2-0 up, that did come against a run of play. And we were like, how are we winning this game 2-0? And then the second half started and they were the better side again. And then we went up and scored 3-0. So I just think against Cardiff, it's the perfect example of how we in the Championship just have the better players, who just have the better quality. They had more of the ball, more of the territory. They were playing well without actually doing anything with it. We were getting half a chance and putting it in the back of the net. Like some of the goals we scored on Saturday were brilliant goals, whether they were long range efforts from Zeki Amdouni or Johan Berg Gudmundsson. You know, there were a quick counter attack and a brilliant finish from Josh Brownhill. So yeah, it's been a great start. It's been a little bit different to the style that we played under Vincent Kompany. There's no obsession with possession. Didn't mean to make that rhyme perfectly, but we do still play around with it at the back. We'll not play around with it, we'll pass it around at the back and invite the press and then try and hit you and stuff like that. Obviously, you've referenced the Luton game already. We scored 2 goals like that, where we just invited them up the pitch, pinged it forward, brilliant ball through. Not a long ball, a long pass. And then they were clean through on goal. So yeah, it's been interesting. Good start. Obviously, couldn't have gone any better unless we scored 5 against Luton and didn't concede. But, you know, it's weird because the fan base isn't overly over the moon either as well. Some fans are still a little bit like, oh, well, we should be having more possession than Cardiff at home against Cardiff. I'm like, what does it matter? We've won 5-0. So you'll always get them. But yeah, it's been a great start, mate. It really has.
I know you don't want to, but there's so much interesting stuff to look back on last season. So I've got a couple. Looking back on it, you know, last time we spoke, you were like cruising in the Championship. And like in reality, we played really well in that 4-2 game you referenced before. We went 2-0 up at half time and you thought, well, you know, it's hard for any Championship team to come back from 2-0 down. And then second half, you just sort of did what you want. And it was like a real harsh lesson for us to come up against a team that was so far ahead. But that was a season where we finished 6th. It kind of proved how far ahead you were of the rest of the teams. But you go up to the Premier League and like, bloody hell, you struggled. I think it was lost 12 of his first 15 games. As a Sunderland fan, we've been there. We know what it's like to kind of know you're relegated in September, if you know what I mean. But how tough was it as a fan? Because like 9 months of a season where you feel like from pretty much day dot you're knackered can really take its toll on a fan base.
Yeah, it was hard work. Not going to lie, like you said, I remember that Sunderland season where you were utterly dreadful in the Premier League, but like we just felt exactly the same last year. We were just utterly dreadful, barely laid a glove on anybody. I remember talking about it recently, actually, on our podcast, and I only remember 3 wins, and I'm like, oh, we only won 3 games. We actually won 5. So that just shows how I've just completely forgotten the majority of the season. Like people sometimes say, oh, do you remember that game against Man City where we lost 3-0 on the opening day? I'm like, weren't it 3-1? Like, no, it was 3-0. I'm like, like, I just completely put it out of my head. But yeah, with Tedious, mate, obviously, I have a season ticket. I do go to a lot of away games. I'm going up to Sunderland this weekend. But yeah, it got to the point where I just didn't want to go on anymore. So I kind of, I won't say I stopped going on away games, but there were certain games where I'm just like, yeah, I'm not bothered with that one. Like, I didn't go to City away, didn't go to United away, which in the end were a regret because we got a good draw there. But it kind of stops you from wanting to go on. Like, I do live in Burnley, but I live at the other side of Burnley, so it's not a pain in the arse to get to the turf. But it takes 20 minutes, 25 minutes, and you're rushing, trying to beat traffic and stuff like that. And you're sometimes thinking, do I really want to be doing this? It's one of them, like, you still end up doing it before people go, bloody hell, what a fair weather fan. Like, I'm still doing it. I'm still there every week, especially in the home games. But there were so many times, like last year, I went all the way down to Brentford, and it's like a 4-hour drive down to London on a good day, and a 4-hour drive back, and then you can't park anywhere near the stadium, because I'm one of them that likes to drive, because I don't want to be bound by the coaches and stuff. I just want to do what I want. If I want to go to Mackey's on my own, for example, other fast food restaurants are available, I can do that. So I remember you can't park anywhere near the ground, and about the 70th minute at Brentford, we were 2-0 down at this point, and it started chucking it down. Then they scored a third, and I'm thinking, wow, I've got to walk back to the car. And it was about a 45-minute walk away, and I had my little boy on my shoulders like that. He had his hood up, and I'm just walking back thinking, why am I doing this year, man? We're utterly dreadful. And yeah, it weren't great. But the football, like Kompany, how he's got the Bayern job, I'll never know. But he was too stubborn. He had his favourites. He wouldn't change the way he played. He wouldn't change certain personnel. Like, I've got nothing against James Trafford personally, but he's just not good enough for the Premier League at this stage. I do think he will be. I do think he'll be a good goalkeeper. But it was clear from, like you say, September, that this kid wasn't good enough, and he was just getting bullied, and Kompany just played him week in, week out. Well, there's so many different layers to this, mate, as well, because like Vincent Kompany has apparently shares in a certain agency, and a lot of these players that he were buying were from this agency, like James Trafford. Hence why he had a monetary interest in James Trafford doing well, and he was part of this analytics team that were helping Burnley scout players as well. So there's just so many different layers to it, and then he's just left us with 200 million quid's worth of players and gone to I nearly said Brighton, then that'd be more realistic. Gone to Bayern Munich, and then just left us in the lurch. Obviously, we've started well under Scott Parker, and Scott Parker seems like a nice guy that I'm going to like. I think we've started well, so if we can continue that, then fingers crossed it carries on. But yeah, it just wasn't an enjoyable season, mate. And yeah, like I said, it was getting to the point where I was going on games thinking, I don't really want to be doing this, especially in long winter months when it's freezing, chucking it down, and you're just thinking, I could be all in front of fire watching this on a perfectly legal streaming device. So yeah, it were hard work, mate.
There was some games I was watching, because it's a Sunderland fan. You were watching Luton and Burnley and Sheffield United to see how they got on, because obviously I think maybe not Luton, but they're beat us in the playoffs. But there was teams like the top two were so far ahead of us that year, and we thought, we've done all right here. The likes of like the players that mature, and now Jack Clark and stuff. At the time, you thought, I wonder how we'd get on, and then you seen Burnley just get destroyed, with all due respect, and Sheffield United just get even more destroyed. Even the game, you beat Sheffield United 5-0 at one point, which kind of went, all right, okay, that's kind of sort of where you're at. But the interesting thing, maybe from a Sunderland fan's perspective, and maybe from yours as well, to be honest, was I normally get asked about Sunderland Till I Die, or what do you think of the Netflix documentary when I go on Opposition podcast? Because of course you do. Yeah. Big podcast, but like for the first time ever, I get to switch that. I've watched Mission to Burnley. I think I've got the last episode to go, so I've still got the relegation bit to go, and Kompany going to Bayern and stuff. And I must admit, I enjoyed it, because there was parts of it, like if you haven't seen it, there's a bit where the chairman, who's American, tries to bring in a drum, and Burnley fans in a very northern way were like, no, get fucked, not happening. It was very funny because I identified with it, but I don't like watching Sunderland Till I Die the first two seasons because it hurts. And I feel like we're getting laughed at. Whereas I also understand what it brings a lot of people to the club from outside, which is always beneficial. But what were your thoughts on it, considering how difficult the season was, and how do you feel like the owners, the players, and Kompany, of course, came across?
You know what? It's interesting that you brought this up, because I've literally just released today an interview with the guy that was the founder of the production company. And I did ask him about the Sunderland one off camera, I think. I can't remember. I haven't watched it back. I've just put it out. I remember asking him about the Sunderland one and sort of like said, obviously the one when we won the league was very popular in Burnley. But I think this one will be popular more across the world of football. I think this one will be seen more by people because people will be interested to see what went wrong and what it was like when it went wrong. And I think that's why the Sunderland one was so popular, because obviously these filmmakers have come in to hopefully watch you get promoted to the Premier League after your relegation from the Premier League. And obviously it just capitulates and goes the opposite way. So I did ask that and I said, do you think that it's done so well like the Sunderland one did because it's sort of like, woe is me and like, look at all this car crash? It does show, obviously there's the big scene where Kompany loses it at Johan Berg Gudmundsson, where it's interesting that, because I'm not stupid. I know stuff like this happens in football a lot more than people realise. I used to work for Bradford City. I worked for Bradford City tonight for just under a year, and I saw that happen every couple of weeks, not necessarily with the manager, but something on the training ground. But it's the bit where it's ended and they both go in their separate ways, and then Kompany runs back at him and says, "Go on then, big boy." I'm like, that's a bit far, that bit. And I asked him about that and talked to him about that. And then there's the scene where Jack Cork and Lyle Foster end up having a bit of a do in the changing room. The difference with that one was it showed them making up afterwards, and you could see that one was just a case of, I just felt like I had to say this, or I felt like I had to say this. I actually really enjoyed it. A lot of Burnley fans have turned around and said they prefer season 2. Because of the jeopardy, I think. Personally, I don't know how as a Burnley fan you can prefer season 2. Season 1 is one of the things that I will watch in 10 years with my little boy and say, look at this. This happened when you were 40, when you were 4. Watching it back now 10 years later, you couldn't experience it. Come and experience it again with me. But season 2, I've watched it. I do make a cameo in every single episode, by the way, just my voice. Unfortunately, I've obviously got a face for radio. But I don't think I'll watch that one back. I may watch it back again within the next month or so, but I don't think I'll ever watch it back after that. Like, put it this way, I'm not going to say to my little boy in 10 years, come and watch this, mate, when we were absolutely dreadful. But I do think it shows a different sort of light on the football club, and it shows what 99% of football clubs are like, because we're not all your Man Cities who are winning every single week. Like every football fan, apart from the kids and, the people that aren't from the UK who choose clubs based on how good they are, has to go through this. Like, you've been through it, obviously you've referenced it. Every single football club will experience a relegation, apart from probably the top 6 in the Premier League. And sorry to say it, probably, the other lot as well that have got a lot of money now that are trying to get into the top 6. But it's interesting to show that side of it, and I think that's why it's done quite well. I think that's why it'll do very well with other football fans as well. But yeah, it is good, and yeah, like I said, I have just released an interview with the guy that founded the production company, so you can watch that on TurfCast now, or listen to it on the pod if that's the way you'd rather digest content.
I found that, like, when I was watching it, because last time we spoke, look, I can understand 100%, even before watching the documentary, why Kompany may be not the most popular figure at Turf Moor. But last time we spoke, obviously you were like winning every game, and it was his first season. You were gonna like him at that point. He was kind of building this sort of cool legacy where you thought, in time, get us up, establish us, do well with us for like 5 years, and then he might move on somewhere else when he's really done the groundwork. I don't know, I've always liked Vincent Kompany as a footballer, because it's kind of hard not to admire what he did. He kind of grew with Man City, but joined them before all the big money came in, and just stayed there and captained the club and all that kind of stuff. And outside of his kind of white trainers and suit job that he did at the Stadium Light, I thought he looked pretty decent. But when I'm watching the documentary, I'm like, he's not changing anything here. And I knew what was coming, so I knew that his stubbornness was going to absolutely mess you up. But then it gets to the end of the season, after all of that frustration, when he might have like a second chance to be like, we just weren't good enough, and I made mistakes, and I can learn. And he like, I don't want to see he fucks off to Bayern Munich, because I'm aware of how big of a club Bayern Munich are. But he gets a job and doesn't really give it a second thought about leaving. And I haven't seen anything come out about him saying, it was a hard decision to leave. I could be wrong, and X, Y, and Z. It's all been about like what's happened for him next. And I also see him, I can't remember the exact quote, but didn't he say like he wanted you to be more respectful or something when, I think it was Benson scored against Blackburn and you got promoted. It was something along the line, something like that. And I was like, if we did that against Newcastle, I'd want us to be like in the home end, diving all over them and sticking up them. It just feels a bit weird about Vincent Kompany and Burnley. Can you give me a bit more behind how he's viewed at the minute?
It's weird because obviously we're all disappointed it left, apart from a handful of fans who did. There were some fans towards the end of last year that wanted him out. When I look back at it now, I do think to myself he was just being stubborn because he wanted brand company to be viewed as this progressive manager who wants to play in a certain way. But I don't think that makes him look like a good manager. It might, obviously, he's got Bayern, so he's done something right. I'm sat here in my spare room, you know what I mean? And he's only a couple of years older than me, and he's managing Bayern Munich, so he obviously knows he's done something right compared to me in life. But I look at that and just think it was all about brand company. It wasn't about Burnley. It was nothing to do with keeping us up. It was about making him look good. But at the same time, how does being stubborn and refusing to change anything make him look like a good manager? It doesn't. It made him look like we kept talking about on the podcast about how he's going to learn and grow with us, as you mentioned there, like he did with City as a manager. I'm thinking, well, he'll learn from his mistakes, he'll take us down, and he's the best person to take us back up. So that's why I wanted to keep him. But I'm not sure whether he would have done. He may have just done the same thing again to keep brand company going. I'm not sure. But it's interesting on how you say like how he's viewed in Burnley, because you can be annoyed that he's left for Bayern Munich and also understand that it's Bayern Munich. I always say the two aren't, exclusive and mutual. I can be annoyed that he's gone, but also understand it. Like when a club like Bayern Munich comes calling, like you can't really turn them down. But at the same time, even when you watch the documentary, like I do genuinely believe he believed he would be here next season. I seem to remember Bayern going through manager after manager after manager and getting all of these managers rejecting him, and me not giving it a second thought. Obviously, why would you? You're not a Burnley fan. I'm not going to think they're going to come knocking for our manager. Then all of a sudden, they come into Vincent Kompany's like the 11th choice. And I remember just thinking, that's surely not right. But he's not hated, I don't think. Well, I can only speak for myself and the stuff that I see on social media. I don't think he's hated. I think a few people are frustrated. A few people now do look at it and think maybe it was all about brand company rather than being the best manager it can be in Burnley. But it's interesting about the thing you mentioned about Blackburn. Obviously, I don't think he said it directly as a quote, but there was the situation where Josh Browner was lifting this inflatable trophy up in front of the Blackburn fans. And he dragged him away. And he said that about the players, saying, I did that because I just felt we should be a little bit more respectful. Not really about the fans. I don't think he'd have said that about the fans. He himself actually went into the interview afterwards and just said to everybody, somebody asked him a question and he just went, we won the league at Ewood Park. So, he loved it. He loved the emotion of it. But yeah, he's obviously all unravelled since then, and obviously he's now at Bayern Munich. I wish him well, but not too well. But I think it is the sort of place where he will do well. He's going to be the manager of the best team in the league, like he was at Burnley in the Championship. He's going to have the ball more. So he's going to have the better players. He's going to have the bigger budget, and that's where managers, like him are suited. I think it's that old adage where people sometimes say, "Oh, Pep Guardiola's a really good manager, but could he do it at Port Vale? Could he do it at Tranmere?" Vincent Kompany couldn't do it at Burnley in the Premier League, but he probably will do it at Bayern. And I think, again, he's that type of manager where he's suited to that role, but not necessarily suited to others.
Found the chairman aspect of it quite interesting as well, because we've had our fair share of chairmen that weren't great. And I watched, obviously, your chairman, and he's from a different culture. Which is fine. I mean, I like a bit of NBA, and it's a very different culture, and I like it because of that different culture. Football, especially in the north of England, is like not about drums and like creating sort of a fake atmosphere. But I found him quite endearing in the sense that he was doing it for all the right reasons. I don't really know, and purposely haven't looked too far into how Burnley fans feel about the chairman. But what it does give you either way is like an insight into how he works behind the scenes. I found the discussion point about it was like a moral issue. I can't completely remember what it was. You'll remember. And he was talking about the betting
shirts, I think, yeah.
That was it. They said one of the ladies in the meeting said we don't want a betting company sponsor on the front, and he was talking about the money he brings into the club and the reasons he couldn't turn it down and the reasons that he thought about it, the moral reasons, and he came across relatively well, if a little misguided. But for you, it's your football club, so you're going to have a much different opinion to what I'm essentially seeing as a TV character. How did he come across, and did it give you did it give you like more faith in him, or did it kind of like wane it a little bit?
I like Alan. I think, like you said, he's doing it for the right things. Like, ultimately, he's a businessman, right? He wants to leave the club in a more valuable position as to what he found it. He wants to make a profit on the club. I'm obviously privy to that. I'm not going to sit here and say he's doing it for the love of the club. Like, he could have chose anybody. I think he tried to buy Sheffield United a few years before he bought us, if memory serves. But he's got his heart in the right place, and he's one of them chairmen. Like, if you go to the fan zone beforehand, he's walking around saying hi to everyone. And like, I don't know if you watched the first season of the documentary, but there's literally a clip where he's walking around the fan zone, and some old lady comes up to him and says, "Have you seen the state of this table? There's stuff everywhere." And he starts moving on glasses and wiping it down and stuff. And like, not many chairmen do that. Somebody like, "Come on, do this," to one at staff. He's genuinely got his heart in the right place, and he wants what is best for the club and what is best for the community. I agree, Law. He's sometimes just makes a rod for his own back. The betting thing is because when he first joined the club, he joined Twitter, and then he followed all the Burnley main pages and all the biggest Burnley fans and stuff like that, and then started tweeting about stuff, and fans were asking him questions. And there's a guy on the Twitter Clarets, as we call it, the hashtag, and he's massive into like being against gambling sponsors and stuff like that. I'm literally sat here with the new shirt on, and we have 96.com, a betting sponsor on it, so this obviously didn't go very well. But this guy messaged him and said, "Look, I'm not a big fan of betting companies. I know people who have struggled with mental health due to gambling addiction and stuff like that. I don't think it's morally right that football clubs have all these gambling things sponsored everywhere. But we are literally in the Sky Bet Championship and things like that. So it's difficult for clubs. I understand that." But Alan responded to that and said, "Yes, as a Mormon," because obviously that's his faith, he's a Mormon. He says, "This is something I feel very strongly about, and we'll be looking into it and hopefully it's taking steps in the right direction so the club isn't, having betting sponsors plastered all over their shirts." Since then, we had classic football shirts for a year, which was, a really good sponsor. And everyone's like, "Yes, he's done it." And then 2 years on the trot now, we've had betting sponsors. But like, it's at what point do you take the less money and put not necessarily the future of the club in jeopardy, but give other clubs an advantage who are getting more money from sponsorships, especially now we're in the Championship and we need to fill the gap of the Premier League money. At what point do you sit there and say, "Tell you what, I'll take 100 grand a year off classic football shirts rather than 750 grand a year"? I'm just plucking numbers out there. It could be whatever. I understand. I don't have an issue with betting. I literally work for a betting company. So I have no moral obligation to sit here and say the club shouldn't be doing it. But I just feel like he shouldn't have tweeted that when he first joined the club. Like I said, he's made a rod for his own back. Like, he's got his heart in the right place, but sometimes he's learning on the job. And another thing that is kind of like an Americanism that I feel like he's brought over with him is kind of like this scattergun approach to transfers. It seems like we're upheaving the squad every single season. Like when we first joined, when we first got relegated, this is not necessarily his fault, but we lost James Tarkowski, we lost Ben Mee, we lost Nick Pope, we lost Dwight McNeil, we lost all these players. And then we brought in about 10 players. And then the season after, when we go straight back up, we let Nathan Teller leave, we let Ian Martson leave. All right, we tried to get Ian Martson, but he didn't want to come, and he went to Dortmund, so fair enough. But, all these players left. And then, again, we signed like another 10 players, and it's happening again this summer. It's happening again now. We've lost Sander Berg today. We're partly rumours like 5 more other players leaving, and now there's all these rumours, all these other players are coming in. But that's like an Americanism. It's like what Chelsea are doing, but obviously to not that extent. And I feel like that's how they do it. I mean, I don't really watch American sports, if I'm honest, but you'll know more than me. I think that's how they do it in like the NFL with the rosters, how they call it. I'm not sure, but I kind of feel like they've brought that over with them. And I can't sit here and criticise it really because it seemed to go okay, but I kind of always feel like it's one step forward, 2 steps back with it. You know what I mean? Like we're losing Sander Berg today, we're bringing in Hannibal apparently. Hannibal's okay, but he's not Sander Berg level. And if we do still go up, then maybe we're not going to have the squad again, and we're just not learning from what happened last season. And I feel like they are kind of learning on the job, and they're bringing things over with them that isn't necessarily football culture and stuff like that. And yeah, I've probably gone a little bit too much on that answer, but just to summarise, I like him. He definitely cares for the club and the community. I just sometimes feel like he does make a rod for his own back. He's kind of learning on the job.
That's exactly how it came across, to be fair. And it's funny you mentioned the transfer window, because I looked at like your last team, and okay, there's one or two players I recognise, but there was players that I was really impressed by in our last championship game, and I was like, where the hell's he? And if anyone's wondering, by the way, it's not Hannibal Lecter that will be lining up on Saturday. It'll be Hannibal Medjbury of Manchester United. But Sander Burgess, he's going to be gone by the time this has come out, probably. On top of that, I read Masengo, Vitinho, Goodmanson. I work up in Scotland, so I know O'Shea's been chased by Celtic previously and also looked at by Brentford. Weghorst, completely forgot he existed as a Burnley player. He's still there, but
yeah, he is.
I think it's 9 players you brought in at the minute of speaking, and there's already double figures gone out with another 5 on top, if all of them come through. It's a big turnover. Is it something that you rate at the time of speaking? Does the squad look bigger and better, or is it something that kind of, again, like you said before, the draft system, it's almost, isn't it? Like you draft new players in every season.
Yeah, it's exactly that.
How do you connect with it?
I don't like it. It's, like the old adage, never fall in love with a lone player. Like, we've changed it now at Burnley to never fall in love with a player, because even when we're signing somebody, they're leaving the summer after. I don't particularly rate it, no. Like, I feel like I can't get attached to a squad. I can't get attached to a player. Like, I felt so, what's the word, sort of like, not attached, unattached, obviously, to the Premier League team last year. And this year, like, we're starting to get, he was poor last year, but he's starting to grow and we're starting to like him. And then all of a sudden, the rumours that he's away. Like, you can't settle at the minute. And my only anxiety, like, genuinely, our squad as it is now, as I'm speaking to you now, before all the outgoings are confirmed, by the time this gets out, we might have lost 4 of these. But I do think the squad that we have now wins the league, and wins the league pretty comfortably again. My anxiety is, if we sell Sanderberg, who, to be fair, hasn't played a minute yet this season, we've been all right without him. If JBG goes to Saudi Arabia, again, he's played 30 minutes, but then we've lost Wilson Odebear, brilliant player with a brilliant future. Vitinho's linked away. Josh Brownell's linked away to Turkey. You've got O'Shea linked away to Brentford, Ipswich, Celtic and Wolves now. Esteve has been linked with a move away. James Trafford to Newcastle. I mean, they can have him. I'll drive him up myself. But there's so many players that are being linked away. And even if some of these players, like your Goodmansons and your Sanderbergs, haven't played too much this season, there's still going to be a lot of disruption in the squad of all these players leaving and the new players coming in. Like, will Hannibal come in and fit in? Will he have any friends? Like, there's a lot of French and Belgian players there, obviously all speaking the same language, and they're quite close. And I do worry that there's got to be new players coming in that don't really fit in and don't really fit the system and stuff. So, no, I don't really rate it. Like I said, mainly because the squad as it is now, I'm very confident wins the league, but I'm not sure what the squad's going to look like on September the 1st. Thankfully, there's some of them that are not great links, like your Vitinho one that you mentioned. I can't see him leaving. Your Hando Masengo, I can't see him. Having said that was Liquip, and Liquip can be quite good, to be fair. I just think it'd be such a stupid decision from Burnley to let him go. I'm just thinking, well, surely not. But the Vitinho one is only links from South America. All right, it's from South America. And they're actually reporting on it. There's no good source from Europe. And then someone from the Mirror today, I think it was Darren Anderson, if that is his name, I know his last name's Anderson, reported that the links are wider than the mark. So I'll be surprised if Vitinho goes, put it that way. But yeah, we need to be smart on who we let leave. Like Darver O'Shea, if he wants to go, he can go. But genuinely, I do believe that the best centre-back partnership in this league will be Darver O'Shea and Maxime Esteve. If we break that up and then we end up getting beat 3-0 up at Yorgap on Saturday, and then we've got Blackburn the week after. Like, I don't want an unsettled squad when we're playing Blackburn. Like, we haven't beaten us for 14 years. I want to keep this going. Like, this is the biggest dominance ever in the run of the East Lancashire Derby in terms of wins in a row. We're beating them 6-7 times in a row. They cannot beat us. So if we proper dismantle this squad and then have an unsettled squad and then lose against you, lose against Blackburn, and then we've got Leeds a week after, there's going to be uproar. Fans are going to be fuming. So it just don't make any sense to me to do it. I know some players want to leave, but why are we suddenly, out of nowhere, linked with about 8 players leaving in the last 24 hours? It just seems all a bit scattergun and happening all at once to me.
It was one of the most, like, when you're setting the questions up, when you're looking at and you're kind of researching as best you can in the day before I do these podcasts, as you'll know, from the vice versa side. Burnley was like a really interesting one, because it was just like, oh, hang on, like, is this going to be out of date by Wednesday? And I thought, I'm just going to have to go for it. It doesn't matter. Let's discuss it. But, things hopefully will change with Sunderland, because we need some sort of numbers in there as well. But, the last time we played each other, from a neutral perspective, there were good games. Like, You would have enjoyed the 4-2. To be fair, I enjoyed the first 45, and I was down at Turf Moor for the 0-0. And I know it was 0-0, but it was a good 0-0. Like, it was an enjoyable 0-0. Hughes was safe anyway, so it wasn't like any real dent on Hughes. We got a playoffs that year. You won the league. We struggled a bit more last season. The first 2 games have looked a little bit more like us, in my opinion, this season. I know you wouldn't have seen us that much last year because of different divisions. But what have you made of Sunderland from what you've seen so far this season? And do you think we could be a team that could push the likes of Burnley for promotion, be that playoffs or be that automatic?
Yeah, potentially. I think playoffs is probably more your bag. I think if you finish in the top 6, you should be happy with that. I always find it interesting when squads that aren't necessarily fancied start well. Like, can they keep it up? Like, personally, I think Watford will fade. I think they'll fade quickly. I had Watford down and struggling, to be fair, if I'm honest with you. So it shows what I know. But I think you'll be up there. I think top 2 might be a bit of a push. We'll see. Again, though, it depends how Leeds recover from losing, the likes of Rutter and stuff like that. They've lost an Alfie May and that, and Somerville, and how we recover from losing the players that we're on about. Because I did say at the start of the season it'll be Burnley and Leeds, but I'm not sure what order. Then Leeds lost a few players, and then we started well. So I'm like, well, we're going to win the league, and now obviously we're decimating our own squad out of nowhere. So I'm not sure. But if Leeds and Burnley don't recover, then that obviously blows the door wide open. You've got Sheffield United, who started well. All right, they threw away a 2-goal lead against QPR. That you've got yourselves. I do think you'll be all right. I obviously didn't see the game against Cardiff, but I remember speaking to a Cardiff fan, because obviously we played Cardiff last week, and I asked him about the game, and his opinion was that Cardiff actually played quite well and Sunderland were just clinical and punished them, which is pretty much exactly the same as what we did to them. I do think you finish in the playoffs, if I'm honest. I do remember Gab Sutton predicting you to win the league, and I laughed my head off when he did that. But I guess after the first 2 games, I guess after the first 2 games, he's looking at that and thinking that might be a good prediction. I think for you to win the league, or for you to finish in second, I think a lot has to happen to other clubs like Leeds and Burnley and stuff. But then bricks might be falling into place with you, as we're looking at the Leeds squad and the Burnley squad right now. So Saturday will be interesting. I think if you beat us, a beat us comfortably, people will start sitting up and taking notice of you. But how many times do we see teams start well and then fade? I don't think you'll fade too much, but you might fade and fall into like 4th, 5th.
Yeah, no, I would take that. I'd take that in a heartbeat. I think I said 8th at the start of the season before we played really well in the first 2 games. So I would take comfortably anywhere between 1st and 6th. Thank you very much. I used to say who the players you were sort of worried about, but I've changed it a bit this year in the preview show, and it's interesting because I think we're playing probably the strongest team in the league this season. On the weekend, I do think Burnley will win the league. But you have been linked to one of our players, and I've changed this question a bit. If you could have one player from Sunderland, who would it be and why? Because I think that's maybe a bit more interesting, because our best players, much of a muchness, there's a couple of people that we'll mention. But who would fit into your squad if you could take just one? Who would it be?
Jack Clark, obviously, he's the one that we've been linked with, and he's brilliant. Obviously, he can play. He's more of a winger, isn't he? But obviously, we play kind of like it's kind of like a 4-2-3-1. So we have like 4 forwards, but obviously not 4 strikers, and we have the 3 playing just behind Lyle, who plays in the 9 role, and then you've got these forwards who are all quite versatile, who can play anywhere along that not back line, but the line behind the striker. He would fit that line perfectly for us. Obviously, you've got Bellingham as well, not Jude, the other one. He'd be a good fit, but I think, is he more of a box-to-box? Obviously, I've not seen Sunderland too much, but I think he's more of a kind of like a box-to-box, or is he kind of like a 10?
I think his best position's box to box. He played defensively. He played in the 6. He played in the 4. He played the 8. He played up front a lot last season. The new managers came in and gone midfielder and in a box to box way. He was. I'm trying to swear less this year on the podcast, but he was fucking outstanding on Sunday. I think that's his position. Yeah,
I agree. But so we have Josh Brownhill for that at the minute. And would I kick Josh Brownhill out of the team for him? I fully believe he'll go on to have a better career than Josh Brownhill, don't get me wrong, but right now, probably not. So, Jack Clark for me. And I know you get that answer probably a lot with Jack Clark, but just looking at our system, I think he would fit it brilliantly. Just playing in behind them front 3, either on the right or the left, and then cutting inside if he needs to.
No, I can't disagree with it. I think he's prime from the Premier League with Sunderland next season, not this season at all. Or
as long as it's Sunderland and not Leeds, I'd rather than get promoted with Sunderland than Leeds, mate.
They can have Benson because they're linked to him today. They can have him and just keep their hands off Jack Clark. That'll be fine. You might disagree, but
I do.
2 real quick questions. You mentioned Lyle Foster there. Obviously, I think people knew what happened with him last year. How's he doing? Is he all right?
Seems to be, yeah. It seems to be. Like, he has this weird tick that you sometimes see, and I never really saw it. Then he had his mental health breakdown, which is obviously well documented. Then he came back, and you'll see him sometimes sort of like moving his head forward and sort of like doing that. And when the ball's not with him, you see him doing it. And I remember seeing it at Everton last year, loads, and he barely got in the game, didn't do anything. And when I look back at it, I think maybe he was still struggling. I haven't seen him do it once this year, so I think that might be something that happens when he's not in a good place. I'm not sure, but seems to be doing well. Hasn't scored yet, but has got a couple of assists, I think. Played really well in both games, but without really getting involved in terms of assists or goals. So I just said that. I just said he got 2. I meant goals. But he's done quite well. I just would like to see him get on the score sheet. Not necessarily because I put a 5 on him at like 40-1 to win the Golden Boot, but other reasons as well.
Yeah, I hope he's doing well. That was something that I really kind of identified with last year, and I think it was good to see in the documentary as well. And one part of Kompany that come across actually quite well. But final question before I let you go, because I'm still not paying for Zoom Premium because it's getting more expensive. What's your prediction for Saturday?
You know what? I'd have come in here all confident, guns blazing, if it weren't for this week. You've started well as well. I would take an entertaining draw right now. So I'm going to predict 2-2. That's what I would take. If someone offered me that now, I'd say yes, because you've started so well, and because just think it's going to be all up in the air at the minute with how our squad's doing and how we're decimating the squad. And yes, we might have some new players in by Saturday, probably not, but we've also got let some players leave. So yeah, we've started really well, but I'm a little bit worried that this will disrupt us. So I'll take 2-2. That's what I'm going to predict.
I'm going to go 2-2. I had that in my head beforehand, interestingly enough. I said 2-2 last week, though. We absolutely fucked Chef Wed, so, fingers crossed it happens again, mate. But have an awful weekend, as I'm sure you'll agree with me, from the opposite side. But I'll be on your show later this week. Just before I let you go, mate, where can we find your stuff?
Yeah, so if you just search TurfCast Podcast on all the social media channels, we're on Facebook, quite popular on Facebook, just short of 40k now on Facebook. Obviously on Twitter /X as well. Yeah, doing very well. It's the South Americans, mate. You post something about Lyle and they absolutely... Sorry, South Africans. Post something about Lyle and they absolutely love it. It goes off. But yeah, just search TurfCast Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and all of it and you'll find me.
Sound, mate.